The Athletic had an interesting top 25 coach ranking. You can find more details about this at blueandgold.com. Brian Kelly was the number 3 coach in all of college football. We'll lay out the top 10 of the Athletics, um, top 25 there in just a moment. But Lou, first, what was your reaction to seeing Brian Kelly at number 3? Do you feel like that's about right, or would you have him higher or lower?
Well, I wouldn't have him higher because when you have guys like Nick Saban and Dabo Swinney in the top two, multiple national title winners, and actually Saban is at what is it now, 7?
Right.
That you don't put him above there. But these things can be extremely fluid and fickle, Mike, because it's really predicated so much on what you've just done most recently. You know, I look back at 2017 when they had these type of lists, and Athlon had Brian Kelly at number 25. CBS Sports had him at number 22. Why is that? Well, because they were coming off a 4-8 season, and suddenly the national championship game in 2012, which Notre Dame entered with a 12-0 record, kind of gets overshadowed when you go 4-8. Oh, and by the way, do you know who was number 3 on those lists in 2017 behind Nick Saban and Urban Meyer?
Who's that?
Everyone's favorite had blueandgold.com, Jim Harbaugh. So you can see how fluid these things go with the passage of time. And look, over the last 4 years, Notre Dame is 43-8. They've been in 2 of the last 3 college football playoffs. It's hard to debate as to who's been better for that number 3 position, other than Brian Kelly. I think it's well earned. You can make an argument that, okay, Jimbo Fisher has won a national title at Florida State, and he's got the program at Texas A&M right now rolling into national contention again. So you put him in there. Ed Orgeron won a national title at LSU last year, but this year they had a pretty significant fall off. Maybe you can say it's COVID related or whatever, but when you don't have that same level of consistency as Notre Dame has had the last 4 years, it's going to be tougher for somebody to stay at that spot. And I think there's a cumulative effect here too. I think they're looking at, well, look, Brian Kelly won a couple of national championships at Grand Valley State. Division two, yes, but that says something. He took Central Michigan then to its first MAC championship in 12 years. He led Cincinnati to an undefeated season in 2009, 34-6 there. So I think it's not just what he's done at Notre Dame the last 4 years or even 9 years, but overall for, better part of 2 decades, the consistency.
Let's quickly go through the top 10 here. Alabama's Nick Saban at number 1. Clemson's Dabo Sweeney at 2. Of course, Notre Dame's Brian Kelly right there at 3. Here's who's behind Kelly. Number 4, Lincoln Riley, Oklahoma head coach. Number 5, Ryan Day at Ohio State. Number 6, Georgia's Kirby Smart. Number 7, Jimbo Fisher at Texas A&M, who you mentioned. Ed Orgeron, LSU head coaches at number 8. Dan Mullen comes in at number 9. And Matt Campbell, Iowa State, number 10. So thoughts there? Anyone stand out as too low or too high?
Well, I've always believed for these kind of surveys, I'd like to have a coach have a minimum of 5 years as a head coach before really putting him in there. It's sort of like if we were to say Patrick Mahomes is the greatest of all time based on what he's done. He's been phenomenal. But look, you have a cumulative factor with Tom Brady, whether it's Joe Montana or John Elway, Aaron Rodgers, Peyton Manning. Those guys did it for 15 and in Brady's case, 20 years. And you put just a greater stock or value on that. I call it the Larry Coker effect. Larry Coker won a national title his first year at Miami, but he was given a gold mine. And look,
Right.
to his credit, he didn't screw it up. And then the next year they played for the national title again. But as the years progressed, his personality started taking over the team and the program regressed. So, I think it was Terry Bowden. He started off winning or not losing his first 22 games or so at Auburn, but that didn't make him an all-timer necessarily either. Mike Archer was 10-1-1 his first year at LSU, but was fired about 3 or 4 years later. So you can't just, I don't like going just on the first 2, 3 years. Both Ryan Day and Lincoln Riley inherited tremendous programs from their predecessors, Urban Meyer and Bob Stoops. So it's I could take over, for Bill Gates, and in a year we'd be making great money. Does that make me a great executive? No, I'll screw it up within a couple of years there. So, when you inherit something like that, it's hard to screw it up. And look, Lincoln Riley and Ryan Day might become two of the all-time greats in college football history, but I just think it's too early yet to put them in that category yet.
So does a list like this kind of give you a perspective on Brian Kelly that, hey, like, wow, he's the number three head coach in all of college football per the Athletic. Like, all right, obviously Saban and Sweeney are number one and two, respectively. No one's going to deny that. But is it kind of like for some folks listen to it, it's like maybe the grass isn't greener? Like some folks are like, well, we
Yeah,
can't beat Alabama. We need to fire Kelly. His offenses
yeah,
stink or whatever. It's like, well, these people think he's the next best coach in all of college football. So it's like maybe the grass isn't greener, if Notre Dame were to fire Kelly.
yeah. Well, I don't think there's any thought of that at all, but I think that's where the frustration for Brian Kelly spilled over after the loss to Alabama,
Yeah.
where you could sense it is that it's gotten to him. The questions about when are you going to win the national title? When are you going to win the national title? Why can't you beat the Alabamas and Clemsons? It's sort of like you're listed ahead of 99.5% of the coaches in college football. And this is really spans over 2 decades, but yet it's that zero point 0.5 that is being looked at as, you know what, you're not getting the job done. And I can understand that. Look, any of us, um, if we rank in the top 1, 2 percentile in our industry, and then somebody or your boss or overseer or whatever says, man, this is just not good enough, that gets frustrating after a while. And that's why guys like Ara Parseghian and Lou Holtz, after 11 years at Notre Dame, they had enough. They won national titles, and it became even more difficult after then because suddenly now 10-1, 9-2 was failure. And that's the frustration. Brian Kelly is truly the Notre Dame coach now because 10-2 used to be a peak, and now it's a valley.
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, if Notre Dame goes 10-2 this season, the Irish fan base, I mean, I feel like when those questions get brought up on our board, and what's Notre Dame's record going to be this year, and good fun off-season speculation, I feel like a lot of fans are saying 10-2 would be like a nice reloading season, for a big 2022. And it's just like, man, 10-2 is just like an acceptable but not good. I mean, think about the 2019 season. Notre Dame fell to Michigan and Georgia, and cruised the rest of the way to the season. And 2019 is not looked at as some incredible season. It just looked like, just
Yeah, yeah.
standard Brian
Well,
Kelly.
because 2019 you were going to be the underdog in 2 games at Georgia and maybe at Michigan, and those were the 2 games you lost. So those are the 2 games that count. That's how it's viewed. Notre Dame might be favored in every game this year as well, Mike.
Hmm.
All 12 regular season games. I don't see anyone on that schedule where I say, yeah, they're going to be clearly favored over Notre Dame. North Carolina has to come into Notre Dame Stadium. Um, USC's had their own share of problems. Cincinnati doesn't recruit at the level Notre Dame does, nor does Wisconsin. We always look at these recruiting rankings and how Notre Dame doesn't meet up with Alabama standards. Well, guess what? Wisconsin and Cincinnati and all those other fans say, well, we don't recruit at Notre Dame's level.
That's a great point.
So that's part of the difficulty of this job. That's part of what you sign up for is when you take the Notre Dame job, it's going to be based on that the expectation is to win a national championship. And just Mike, if this season Notre Dame by chance finished 9-3 or even heaven forbid 8-4, you think Brian Kelly will be number 3 on the list next year?
I I think it was one of the coach. I think it was James Franklin slid from like 7 to 14 after Penn State's season this past, and the Big Ten had a joke of a season in 2020. So yeah, these lists seem very fluid.
Oh, it's fickle. It's based on what did you do most recently, and the problem is that both Nick Saban and Dabo Swinney are just too doggone consistent.